Hello, welcome to the July 9th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a minute. I'm going to do a quick audio test on my end, make sure everything is going through. Hello, welcome. All right, so my name is Greg Unda. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you can simply ask your question in the chat field. When asking questions, if the people's ability to ask questions will far exceed my ability to answer them in a real-time manner. So we'll try to go through each of the questions chronologically as we do that. So if we could try to refrain from asking the same questions over and over again repeatedly, that just kind of slows down the whole process. That would be appreciated. Also, when asking questions, if we could perhaps indicate which version of Cubase, which level, like Cubase Elements or Artist or Pro, which operating system that you're using, that information is often helpful as well. So once again, my name is Greg Unda. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as basically a Steinberg product specialist. So I'm presenting from United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So for those that are watching the live stream, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from. If this is your first live stream, let us know that as well. And we will be able, just want to give a special welcome. A couple people I just want to give a quick shout out to. If you wanted to, look for topics that are covered in a live stream, usually probably tonight, I will be doing the index with timestamps of all of the topics covered in this particular live stream. If you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to the website, which is handled by Jan from Stockholm, called cubaseindex.com. So it's a wonderful resource. Because Greg talked about this, you could just do a search there and it'll take you directly to that particular period in the video when we've done it. We also have another, in addition to all the official Steinberg resources of YouTube videos and a website, another great resource of information is the Cubase Nation Discord. So if you were looking for particular tutorials, that's a wonderful resource. I know Jazz Dude often helps with that and gets that organized. So a bit of kudos to him as well. And also we have two people that serve as moderators who can handle some issues when I'm trying to catch up, which is most of the time. So I want to give a special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude for their help with moderation. So we'll wait just another minute and see who will be coming on board. So I'm going to make my cursor just a little bit larger so that people could watch, can see it a little easier. So let me adjust my cursor here. Okay. And I will try to occasionally give out the timestamp of where I am in the video so that we could, so that people could have an idea of roughly how far I am back. So I'll try to do it in, but let's go ahead and we'll get going here in just a second and see. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Hi, I have upgraded to Cubase version 11.03 and I have many issues and bugs. Please, how do I go back to the version before I have updated? So probably if you had the previous version, if you there's a good chance that you might have the installer for the previous version. I think that there may not be like a 1102, 1101 installers kind of readily available. But if you still have the installer download, so if you go to your downloads folder to Steinberg, if you're on Windows, I think it would go to Windows Win64. You could probably find the installers there on Windows platform, or just in the Steinberg folder in your downloads. So if you had the previous version installed and you downloaded it, it's probably going to still be in there. So you could uninstall the application, just the application, and all of your content and projects and everything will remain intact. And then if you needed to go back, the one thing that I would try before going back, because I found 1103 to be more stable for me personally, and we haven't usually, if it's a bad version, we hear about it pretty quickly. But maybe if you start the program by doing running in like a safe start mode, and you could do that, which will temporarily bypass temporarily bypass user preferences as well as third-party plugins. In addition to that, by holding down Alt Control Shift right after double clicking your Cubase icon, or Command Option Shift on the Mac platform. Okay. All right, so we see Space Crawler checking in from Germany, as well as Filter Freak from UK. So glad you can make it. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas and Millard Brown from outside Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, with Soren from Sweden. We see Jazz Dudes on the live stream, and we see John Costigan. All right, so we have John Dinkall, and this is his first live stream, so welcome. Feel free to ask any questions. All right, and we have Theodore from London and Ken from Norway. All right, I see Jan from Cubase Index. All right, so we have Chris Hawley from his first time from Vancouver, Canada. All right, thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Ken just mentioning you just upgraded from Pro 10.5 to 11. Everything is so shiny. It has that new DAW smell. So yeah, if we used to always joke that when you get the package that you get the fresh air from Hamburg, near the harbor. All right. So we have David M checking in from Liverpool. Glad you could join us. All right, and we have Tony from Australia. We realize it's probably very late there. Thanks for joining us. And we have Sir Robert from Atlanta. All right, we have Carlos from Colombia. Okay. All right, and we have Stefan in Sweden. All right. So we're going through lots of introductions here. All right, so we have Mark Rabin in Montana. Michael from New York. Okay, Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, let me just going through all the comments here. All right, we have Pablo from Italy. All right, and if you have questions, go ahead and ask them in the chat field. Let's just, all right. All right, so we have Thermonuclear War from Serbia. We see Ted Springman from Sherman Oaks. We have Nuon from Sri Lanka. All right, Rob from Florida. I believe he was in Tarpon Springs. All right, we have Daryl from Oakland. You just got Dorco Pro. Okay, so just see a question. Is there another program other than ASIO I can use on Windows 10? So if you're on Windows 10 and if you wanted to just use the onboard audio interface drivers, you go to your studio setup here. And, we could just choose, you'll see generic low latency ASIO, and that will work with audio interfaces that don't have dedicated ASIO drivers, and once you click on a control panel, you could just simply route that to any particular to any particular audio interface or anything that's outputting audio on your system for you. All right. Okay, so we have this from India, expecting for the answer for the arranger track plus live patch change feature for live performance. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we could do, kind of if we wanted to do more arranger track functionality with live performance. I think I have a project that has, and this is kind of also asked in the in the comments for Tuesday's live stream. So I'll just jump over here. So let's say we have a particular, we have arranger tracks set up here. And if you're not familiar with arranger tracks, what you could do is basically just set this up where if we didn't want to play in a linear manner, so let's say if I listen to this particular project here, we can see it's going to kind of just play through. But if I wanted this to play in a non-linear manner, the arranger track, I could define different sections of the song. It could be verse, intro, whatever. And we could also have subsections within a section. These could all be titled appropriately. And then we could drag from our defined sections to our and to create multiple arrangements. So now once this is activated, I could go to the beginning, and instead of playing it straight linearly through, we could just have it kind of jump around.
To kiss my face, the world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make it falling before I knew? All at once, you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away.
So now we'll go back to the intro.
Don't it make it
and then to the chorus. So this way we could kind of jump around. Now, what some people want to do is to be able to have just like a MIDI note to trigger the different performances. So if we come over to our studio setup, we could accomplish this, let's say, in our generic remote. So we get to assign MIDI note messages, and this could be from like a MIDI foot pedal board or anything that's doing MIDI drum pads. And we could say, okay, I want, if we go to, let's say, this particular note message, so we could just click on and learn note messages. So if I come here, I click on learn, and then I could just say, okay, we're going to hit this particular note. It will capture that MIDI note message. And what we do is we can assign this MIDI note message to this particular function. So if I go to my command, I'll say, let's go to the arranger track. And now we could actually just choose to do different arranger events. I'll say this note is going to trigger arrangement 5. The next one will be command, and again, go to arranger, and then I want this to control 6. And the next one will be, let's say, 7. So you could create any number of these. So I think we have 20 different arranger events. So now instead of, I could just play and I could just hit a MIDI note message. So if I just wanted to go,
you touch my phone, all at once, you kiss phone,
and we could have this switch with no timing. So just,
all at once, you kiss, all at once, you feel good, all at once, you kiss phone.
and I could just trigger the arrangement from MIDI notes, and I could have that automatically snap to the bar, snap to the beat. So once you have that done, any MIDI note messages that you have assigned, you can just come directly over here and just trigger those particular arranger events in real time. So if you just wanted to jump to song, or turn on a loop, you could set up your generic remote just to do that. And for each of these parts, you could have it trigger different MIDI program changes, where they are in the particular events. So that's a pretty easy way of doing a lot of stuff for live use. Okay, so thanks for all the great questions. And if you learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. Okay, so you see a question. Hey, Greg, in the piano roll, apply legato, delete overlaps, no longer works correctly. It seems to only work on one note, no chord, and sometimes not at all. Any tips on how to fix this? So I think basically, let's take a look at it. So I'll take this little Rhodes part. Okay, so if I want it to apply these where these notes will last and the length will extend, I will just kind of come right over here and let's go to our length. So at this point, I just want it to, let's say, extend to the next, let's say, apply legato. All right, I'm just erase just a couple little notes here. All right, so I'm just going to make sure there's no actual notes selected. I think if we just kind of come over here, let me select just this range. I know I just did this for Film Composer recently. All right, let me just. So you can see that as we do that, we could just adjust. Let's just see if we have the overlaps. So say if I just kind of set this, let me just. I know I've had this function working previously. I could play around with it, but it doesn't. I know when I've done it for chords, like in this kind of scenario, it would just automatically apply the legato to it. Let me just see if I have these notes selected, if that makes a difference. So it seems like it's not behaving as I would expect, but I'll go ahead and mention that to the team. It could be that I'm just doing something wrong. All right, so we see Christian D68 and Jeff Sabelski on the live stream here with us. All right, so it looks like it's Mark Rabin's birthday. Happy birthday. Thanks for spending some time with us. Okay, so I just see a question. How can we get Cubase sound to Zoom? So there are a number of tutorials, I think, on the Cubase Nation Discord. How I'm using it, and what I do is I take the audio output, just because Zoom isn't capable of doing ASIO support. So how I get my audio is I take my audio interface plus my microphone into a Yamaha USB mixer, and then I use the USB mixer to get all of the audio out. But most of the time, I think that some people have used a plugin called Restream, but that's also been very problematic for a lot of people for stability wise. And also some people use Voice Meter, which is a utility that could allow you to do that. Okay, so we have a question. When downloading an update, is it necessary to download all the additional components besides the 11.03 major parts? So generally, it'll be indicated if there's something new. So I think with the 11.03, all you'd have to do is to download the components. And some of the earlier ones, I think there are some minor adjustments that were indicated for some of the content, but with 11.03, all you have to do is just simply download the main program, and all their content wasn't affected. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there any way to select and send different tracks to a specific group by using Logical Editor? So let's take a look. I'll just open up different project here. Okay, so let's say if I want to take all my drum tracks, let's see if we can do it with Project Logical Editor. Not sure if we can, but let's take a look. And let's say we'll make it so the property is the events are selected. So I'm not sure if we could do routing through here. So let's say yeah, so there isn't a way that I know of to do it through the Project Logical Editor, but if you wanted to, simply take these particular tracks, so if you have them all selected, and if you wanted to create a new group channel, you could just say group channel to selected channels. So say, okay, I want this to be a stereo group. So I can add a group channel there. But let's say if I have a group channel that's already in the project, so I'll add a group track. And we'll call this empty group track. So let's say we have this, and if I wanted to just send these particular tracks or a number of tracks to it, I could, activate my quick link. And if you wanted to come over here, you can say, okay, I wanted to send these all to empty. So now if we look at all of the different tracks, they've all been rerouted to empty. If I wanted to take like my number of drum tracks here, and I could also just go to my sends and let's activate. So I wanted to send all of them to my empty group and set the amount of that. So you could do it kind of just there as well. So you could send the amount. So while you can't do it in a Project Logical, it's only about 2 steps to add a number of specific, you can do it in one click to send all selected tracks to a new group track, or it's maybe 3 clicks to send it to an existing one. Okay, so we just see from Umut. Hi, Greg. I want to learn how to use Groove Agent SE. So we'll do just kind of a quick overview on it. So if you have any specific questions, I could probably spend an hour just on Groove Agent SE. But there's 2 different modes that you could work with Groove Agent SE. So there's Beat Agent kits where you could load and create your own samples, and we could think of this as more of kind of like an MPC paradigm. So we could have 32 velocity layers. We could have 32 stereo outputs for Groove Agent. So if we wanted to go to our VST, we could activate 32 stereo outputs directly from Groove Agent. So once we have this, if we wanted to do editing, we could drag and drop any sample directly to pads. You can have the sample spread across multiple pads. We could also, very easily do, editing. So if I wanted to make the kick louder, if I wanted to do tuning of each sample. So I can say, okay, this snare, I want it louder, but this, I want it to be tuned lower. Once you get into like some pitch envelope, and I'll just switch to another project here quickly, just to kind of show some stuff that you could do. Okay, so now that we are here, we could just say, okay, let's just load up. Okay, so now that I just so once we're here, we could just do, again, different volume. So if I want, and tuning, but I could also just kind of do some interesting tuning. So let's say I want to take this kick, and then we could go into like pitch envelopes. So we could say, let's go to our envelope amount, and or if I wanted to take one particular sound, so let's say I'll just go to my main, and I wanted this particular sound. And if I go to my pitch, I could just come over here and let's just randomize the tuning of that one. And then for each of the different sounds, you could also have filters. So I could do them on an individual pad, or if I just wanted to come right over here, let's do maybe a classic filter. So it's and if I wanted to automate any of these parameters via like a MIDI CC, you could just learn CC and move a knob, and that would automatically assign that to the particular controller. You could also come over here. There's full mixing section, so you could have a number of different effects. So you could say, okay, I just wanted a multi-delay, and I wanted this to be set for maybe 1/8 notes. So at this point, we could take this pattern here, and for each of the individual pads, I can say, I just want to take this, and if we wanted to add reverb or different effects, we have that capability. So I could just add effects as sends or globally. If we want to deal with different drum loops, I could just take an audio file that's a drum loop directly inside, and I'll just switch to so we have pattern pads as well as instrument pads. So if I wanted to drag this, I can now, so if I have a drum loop, at this point we could click on the slice tab and we could automatically create our different slices for each of the different rhythmic elements. And if we wanted to, this will make a pattern pad for us, and we could just kind of drag and drop that pattern directly onto our timeline. So lots of great stuff. So you have instrument pads as well as pattern pads. And if we have another mode of Groove Agent, it's almost like a 2-in-1, is that we could also have this be kind of like a virtual drummer. So if I want to just take this particular, if I want it like an acoustic drummer, and I could select the drum sound, add more room to the kick, or tune it. So anytime that I select something, we can see it outlined. So if I wanted to more of like a piccolo snare, and then we could have these patterns on the acoustic agents where we could say I wanted the dynamics to change based on kind of our vertical axis and our horizontal axis. I could have the pattern get to be more complex. And then once we go to our mixer here, I could have, for every single drum source, I could have 4 bands of EQ, compression, tape saturation, an envelope shaper, plus all of my effects as well. So if I wanted more reverb on my snare, but not my kick. So you can kind of work with it as a virtual drummer, or as kind of like almost like an MPC paradigm of working with drums. So it's a quick overview of Groove Agent. All right, so thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see Tan Mays made the live stream. Great to see you. All right, we see Michael Teams is being very generous with ice creams today, celebrating it's Friday. All right, so we just see someone saying hit like 2 times. So if you hit like 2 times, it actually cancels your like. So hit it once or in odd number intervals. Okay, just reading through different questions here. Okay, just reading through different comments. Okay, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, hi Greg, can lanes be made from a part on a MIDI track to make variations of the part to pick and choose for placement in other sections of the project to make a bass part variation, etc.? So let's go ahead and show you how we could do this. So if you want to use lanes for MIDI parts, all right, let me just find something. All right, so let's say I wanted to do just work with lanes on a bass part. So I'm just going to put this into like a quick cycle record. I'll just do a couple measures here. And once we do this, we could go to your MIDI record modes in the lower left-hand corner. And then I'm just going to put it to stacked when we go to cycle record mode. So I will just kind of come right over here, let's say, and let's say my next take. Okay, so now that I've stopped recording, we can now, if I click on the lanes button, sorry. So each of my different lanes would appear. So, and then if you wanted to do editing to make a comp, so you can just kind of treat it the same exact way. So as you just wanted to do, basic comp editing, and let me just disable my snap. So I could just say, okay, I want that part from that. And you could audition kind of your different parts. And so it'd be the same way, but just if you do it in cycle mode and just put it into stacked. And if you wanted to always kind of build up, like maybe you're doing a drum part and you want to do kick and then snare, then hi-hat, you could put mix stacked with no mute. But if you just put it into stacked, that way it'll kind of just do comping, much like what we do by default for audio editing, but in the MIDI domain. All right, so I just see a comment, and maybe I missed this, is I think Greg said that VST Connect wasn't designed for connections within the same studio. So you could do it within the same studio if you had the VST Connect Pro. If you don't have VST Connect Pro, you can you would need, if you just have kind of the included version, then you would have to be on different networks. But if you have VST Connect Pro, you could record internally on the same network. All right, so we just see a comment from David M. Yesterday, I found your tutorial on YouTube how to work with group editing tool in Cubase. I learned more in 10 minutes than I have in years since Atari. Haha. Awesome hidden features. So yeah, the range tool allows you to do a lot of very powerful editing, and a lot of people kind of miss it. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there some tricks on triggering the Apple trackpad to zoom in and out aside from G&H, like Logic does, like a mouse zoom in and out, if there's a command for that? So, what you can do for zooming, without using the trackpad, if you want it to just, zoom, horizontally, you could just hold down the command key and use your mouse scroll wheel to kind of zoom in and out like that. But I don't think it does the pinch zoom, which some people are kind of used to, but you could just, do that, but a lot of times we'll see that people will, G and H and Shift G, Shift H. And, that's kind of right in the middle of the keyboard for a good reason that a lot of people will just kind of utilize that. And I think that you could find that for kind of doing DAW editing, typical editing functions in a DAW to be a bit more accurate. Okay, so we see a question from Christian D68. I often scroll up and down with the mouse wheel in the track list, kind of like this. But if my mouse is just over a button, for instance, the MIDI channel, it will change the value. Is there a way to manage this? So let's say, okay, so I will just load up kind of a larger MIDI project. And we'll give this a try. So, when I'm here, so whatever you're kind of hovering over will be kind of adjusted, and that's just kind of an operating system function. But if I'm just, if I'm hovering over the tracks, it's not going to change the MIDI channel. But if I'm in the MIDI channel here, that could change. But, it's kind of what, and if you're kind of hovering here, maybe, but it's kind of whatever area that you're hovering over. So if I wanted to just change a particular parameter in the info line, it will just kind of automatically adjust, those particular, it's kind of a context sensitive thing. I believe that's not going to be anything specific to Cubase, but how the how the operating system works. I don't know. But if you just kind of hang here, that shouldn't change any of the MIDI channels unless you're over the MIDI channel. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right. Okay, so we see it's Mark Rabin's birthday yesterday. So happy belated birthday, Mark, and thanks for joining us the day after your birthday. Okay, so it says, I have a question about stereo mono tracks. What is a quick way of making a stereo audio clip a mono audio signal in Cubase 11 Pro? Thanks for these streams and cheers from the Netherlands. Okay, so if we have a stereo track, and I just wanted to quickly make it into mono. If you go to your project and go to convert tracks, you could choose multi-channel to mono. And then you could just have your two mono tracks. So once again, project to convert tracks. And you could also conversely do the opposite of mono to multi-channel if you have the track selected. So make sure that one, that you have the track selected, and maybe not necessarily the event, but make sure that a track is selected, and then just project to convert tracks, multi-channel to mono. All right. So I just see from Tanmay, Greg, I got some Neumann KH120As. They sound amazing. Can you give me some tips on room correction and room treatment? So, one old trick that people would do is kind of stick a mirror on the speakers, and wherever they could see whatever part of the room that they could see in the mirror, they would cover that with some kind of acoustic treatment. So, if you watch, I think a good example of this is going to be, I think, Rode microphones. They were doing a video series of a guy maybe it's Francis Buckley, maybe a producer would go to someone's house and kind of set up their room correction, I think, for their event speakers, and and that's what he would do, is just kind of anywhere that you could see from the mirror in the speakers, he would set up kind of acoustic treatments like that. So, make sure that they're not right against the wall, because that could give you kind of false bass. A lot of people, will spend, a lot of money on, different, absorption techniques. Some people will just put a couch in the back. That's always a great one. Or if you don't want it to be a straight parallel wall, you put a bookcase with books in it, and that are all slightly different heights. And, so those are some old school tricks that, might be able to do without a lot of money. And some people are just saying use headphones, but it's another reference. Reading through comments, so we see some other people chiming in. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, is there let me just find it again. Okay, so I just found it. Is there a sonic difference in export, real time, offline, and printing? So, this is a question I get a lot, is if there is a sonic difference in when there is an audio mix down file where you choose to do it in real time, like a real time export versus doing it faster. So there's no sonic difference. The only time that you would really need to use a real time export is if you're utilizing external hardware for processing. So obviously it's not going to render faster than real time for an external processor or an external instrument. So, we haven't defined that part of physics yet. But there's no sonic difference. There used to be kind of almost like big conspiracy theories that there was, because some programs for the longest time would only allow you to do a real-time mix because it was physically running through DSP, but there's no sonic difference between them. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, could you give a guide on a simple expression articulation map, how to simply get it to work? Okay, so take a quick look at it here. All right, so many times, depending on the instrument, so if it's a Hallian-based instrument, Hallian can automatically make the expression maps for you by importing the key switches. So once we double click here, if it's like something that's being used in Hallian Sonic or Hallian or the full, you could just click on import key switches directly from there. But if you wanted to create your own expression maps, you could just go directly to your expression map setup. So here we could load different ones. You could have your remote key, or if you're doing key switches, or if you're doing program change messages, you could choose between those two, or you could do different MIDI CC messages. And so here, when we want to do like a key switch, I can say, okay, we're gonna have A#1 will be spiccato down on a bass, and C0 is tremolo, C# pizz expressivo, and F0 F#0. These could all be different colors. If you wanted to, what type of message is it again? So you can say, okay, it's going to be a note on message. It's going to be a program. It's going to be a controller that switches between these. And you could have these be attributes or directions. So I always get these mixed up, but one is going to be tied to the specific note, and one, I believe that's an attribute, but a direction will maintain until it sees another particular expression. So once we have that, we could go, we'll make our key editor full here. And let's say I'll just start off with my velocity lane only, and then we're going to choose to see articulations and dynamics, and then kind of all of the expression maps will show up directly here. So we'll just solo. So if I wanted to take the oboe and say, let's just make that a bit staccato for those particular notes. And if, as you're entering this in, we could also just make it where it's not necessarily going to snap to the grid. And then I can say, okay, let's have it switch back to legato. So we could take this oboe, and instead of trill's whole tone, I'll try making that staccato instead. So as we start working with this, and let's say I wanted to put a trill on that particular note and go back to legato there. So that's how you could kind of then start adding, but any time that you play particular key switches or the correct MIDI controllers, that will automatically be recorded, so you can just make fine tweaks if you need to. All right, so we see someone joining from Henrico, Virginia. So welcome. So a fellow Virginian, always great to see. All right, so we see Loretta from Vancouver just thanking me for ongoing tips. Okay, so we have a question from George Brighter. How to correct the preload memory message I get from Groove Agent? All right, so let's say if we have our Groove Agent set up here. Okay, so go to the options menu, and then you could just see the max preload. You could then, it defaults to 1200, just raise that up to like 2400 and then save your project. So once again, you'll see the edit, mixer, and options tab. Click on the options tab in the right hand, and you'll see max preload, and then you could just raise that. So I just see a question, can we use automation more effectively? So, you know, automation can obviously be used very effectively. So, but let's take a quick look at maybe a couple of tips and tricks. So let's say if we're on this particular project and you want it to do, so there's a lot of things that people will miss in working with automation. So there's a dedicated automation panel. So let's say if I'm here, I could just click on W and R, and let's say I just want to take maybe the bass part here that's coming in. Let's automate this. All right, so now we'll just go back and we'll see that the automation will now if I hit F6 by default, you could open up your automation panel. Let me just come over here, and there's a couple of settings here. You could also reveal parameter on write. You could choose to show data on tracks. So now as I move my automation, that particular automation lane automatically appears. So if I adjust my panning, we see a new automation lane appear. And if we wanted to, when we clicked on to show data on tracks, this will allow us to see kind of the waveform directly, in the automation lane. So once we start utilizing automation, there's some other great tips and tricks that you could do. So let's say I just want to take that automation and I just wanted to kind of bring it down overall, or raise the overall automation, or tilt it this way, tilt it that way. I wanted to regulate the automation to make it less wide, in just kind of to constrain the width of automation capabilities. And now you could just come right over here and be able to kind of tweak that automation. And if you really like that and you wanted to just duplicate that, you could duplicate the automation. Another automation trick, if you wanted to just put in like a quick bump, you could do that. And if you wanted to tilt the automation, you could just go to the edge here, and we could say, I just want to put in automation curves. So if you wanted to put in different Bezier curves, you could just do that very easily. So I think the automation is pretty effective, but let me know if you have a particular question on the automations. All right, so we have a question. I do have another question. Are there more uses of spectral layers, one, besides unmixing vocal and removing unwanted noises? Is it possible to unmix instruments by hand? Not with the spectral layers 1. So the only unmixing components that you have in spectral layers 1 is going to be the unmixing the vocals. If you have Spectral Layers Pro, such as Spectral Layers Pro 8, just released a couple weeks ago, that way you could take the different, you could isolate the bass from the drums, from the guitars, from the vocals and piano. But the Spectral Layers 1 is just going to be for, for unmixing. You could, it's just going to be for the vocal. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to automatically detect the effect tail end at the last bar of the song so as to avoid putting a song end markers in a trial and error method before mix down? So, you could, depending on, so let's say if I came here and I had a big reverb on my drums, so say I just have a huge reverb, and we'll just... All right, so let's say I just had, a huge reverb. There's always just the, capability of just listening to when the effect is going to cut out. But let's say, okay, I'm going to add... let's say a revelation, and I'll just make this really obnoxiously long and big. Okay, so now as we listen to it, all right, and let me just go to my sends. And let's say I just want to take all my drums and we'll send it to the Revelation, turn them all on. Okay, so now all right, so let's say it roughly ends there, you know. So if you listen to it, you know, so yeah, I would just come over here and just, you know, extend the locator range. If you go to look at the particular effect as well, you know, so say if we go to the Revelation effect here, so depending on the reverb, it may actually give you kind of the reverb time and the tail in milliseconds that you could adjust. So, and you could use those values, but I think it's always going to be better just to, you know, look at the meters, you know, because if you have that going on, let's say, you know, use the meter. And then when you see that kind of settle near zero, stop and just use that as your new export range. So, and, you know, it could be just, you know, if you have multiple reverbs stacked or delays on reverbs, you know, you may just, you know, I think the most accurate way is to use the monitoring and figure out exactly where that particular point ends and use that as the basis instead of doing it and just kind of guessing when the reverb will actually stop. So use the meters. When you see the meter stop, then you'll be all set. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Why, when I record vocal, for example, the level of the wave in the sampler editor is different than the level in the fader? Thanks for your answer. So, you know, if we go to look at, you know, so let's say I'm looking at the bass part here. So, for example, the level of the wave in the sampler editor is different than the level in the fader. Thanks for your answer. So, you know, these two are going to be independent. So we can think of how this is when we see our amplitude here, that this is kind of how loud it was recorded. And the fader is, again, just going to be, you know, so we're taking this level of the, let me just mute the reverb. So, you know, this is where our record level was. So we could think of that. And this is kind of what was captured. And when we go to our meter, you know, this, our fader rather, you know, so we've still captured, but this is just attenuating how much of that signal is going into the mixer. So those two aren't correlated. If you wanted it to be more correlated, you know, because this is going to be after playing the signal and it goes through kind of our signal flow here from left to right. So the last thing we have here is our meter. But if I wanted to affect and to have that gain structure change, at this point I could just grab the center line and we could, you know, but still come over here. We could attenuate it before, but, you know, it doesn't actually change the wave file. This is just going to actually just kind of process it here. So just think of that these are independent. So this is going to take the recorded file and I could adjust the gain beforehand and or I could adjust it afterward, but we still have the amplitude of the particular files. All right, so we just see, could you show how to work with articulation expression mapping using symphonic orchestra? So I think we just did that a couple minutes ago, just for Coppery Singer 5. But if you didn't see that, just let me know and I could do it again. Okay, just lost my spot. Just find it. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to view the transport controls during the MIDI editor window or audio editor window? Okay, so, we could always have the transport fixed. So if I wanted to come here, we could have the transport bar kind of fixed at the bottom of the project window. If I'm in, let's say I have a MIDI part. So here, if I'm doing sample editing or MIDI editing, I'm in the lower zone. I could see that, but let's see if I want to come here. We could also, when we go to the top, let's see if we could have our, sometimes you might have a transport. So, once you're here, you could probably just use the same keyboard shortcuts for transport. Or if you have this open, kind of slightly, in this way where the bottom transport will be there. So a lot of people will do that. Or, once they're here, they could just double click. So say within the sample editor, but you could always hit F2 to have kind of a floating transport in if you needed to see it in the sample editor or in the full screen MIDI editor. Just kind of hit F2. So if you're full screen, hit F2, and that will bring back kind of the floating transport. All right, so we have a question. Hello, how can I balance the tensions without parasites being heard at high volumes? Okay. So maybe if you're trying to balance the tensions with, I'm not sure if it's maybe a mistranslation or if I'm not understanding, but I haven't seen parasites, come out in mixes. But I would say that if you're doing, if you're probably mixing at high volumes, I would always suggest mixing at lower volumes. And then that would be, significantly could get you better results. And then it's also allowing your room not to be as much of a factor if you're mixing at lower volume. Some of my best engineer friends who get, who could get more money mixing a project in 1 week than I get paid all year will, simply mix it very, very low volumes. But maybe if you could rephrase your question so I can understand it a bit. Okay, so we see how to color the fader. So let's say if I'm in my mix console here, and let's go to our preferences, and let's say our track and mix console. So as soon as we do this, we could see our faders, like kind of the whole channel strip throughout, kind of assuming the channel colors like so. So you could accentuate that. And sometimes we'll have different color faders for different types of data. But if you wanted to change that, you could just come over here to, let's go to your preferences. And when you go to mix console fader colors, you could adjust these for any of the different channel types. So. All right. So we see P Zone 36 checking in from the UK. Thanks for joining us. See, Jeff Sabelsky's also saying records and books are great diffusers. The messier room with stuff, the better. Yeah, when I moved into a new house about a year and a half ago, I wasn't liking my room, and behind my desk I had some workers left almost like a moving cloth. So I put that behind my desk, and a small couch and a string bass that's kind of in its padded case. And then, all my room correction problems seem to go away. So they seem to all be resolved pretty naturally. Okay, so I just see hi Nuendo with M1. So currently, Nuendo version will be running under Rosetta. So they're kind of doing more investigations onto further optimizations and what optimizations are available to take advantage of. But there's still going to be a lot of third-party components that may never work on Rosetta. It's kind of out of our control. So if you're doing like Rewire, maybe VST2 plugins may never actually be natively supported on for Apple Silicon. So there's a lot of components that are kind of out of our control as well. Okay, hi Greg, thanks for the tutorials. They're excellent resources. I use them frequently. That's great. So the question is, I'm having trouble loading my saved color set as I move between projects. Is there a trick to saving them? So I think if we just go to the color setup under projects, and once we have this all set up, if we go to options, try just save color set as default. So once you have a color set up, just click here to save color set as default. I think that will take care of it for you. All right, so just see a question, Nuendo with Windows 11. So, again, there aren't really, I don't think that they're anticipating too many problems, but that could always change. And we're just kind of waiting for more versions to become available for testing. So so obviously the Steinberg developers are aware of all the new operating systems that are coming. So I was recently on a meeting with Philippe Goudier, who's the Wavelab developer, kind of the genius behind Wavelab. And he was just like, he's like, I don't anticipate any problems. And he's like, I still run Wavelab version 1 that was written for Windows 3.1 is still working on Windows 10 without any problems. So. All right, so we see Pablo joining us. It's wonderful to have you. Glad you can make it. All right, so we have Dave checking in from Portland, Maine. Thanks for joining us. And we see Tim Weinheimer also. So just see a comment. I wish there was a way to open a Pro Tools session, etc., in Cubase. Maybe one day. I think even their their parent, even though it's the same parent company, the Avid video programs can't even open up a Pro Tools session. So everyone pretty much just migrates back and forth using AAF. So it's usually not a big problem. All right, we have a question from George. Can an SD card or flash drive be used as an external drive for Cubase in any way other than a place to store old project files? Some of them can be pretty fast. So I have like a little Samsung like USB drive, and I've played 16 tracks of audio, maybe even more. I think one project I had going, and I haven't tested this in a while, but I think I had 32 tracks of audio kind of going along, just playing all from a flash drive. So I would, definitely, use it for not only transferring, but, you could always try, because the flash drives and SD cards, you can't get fast ones. Okay. So we have Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. So we just see a question from Pablo. Hi, Greg. Is there any way other than using Shift to be able to select tracks and make them stay selected? So I think it's kind of a standard, operating system function where you can say, okay, I want to, so if I want to select, a single element, I can do this. If I want to select multiple elements, I think also if you hit Command or Control, that you could do it non-sequentially. So you could do it like that also. So if you don't want to use a Shift key, try using the Command or Control key. All right, so you see Mark Rabin like the automation hints. Okay, so you see, all right, just going through more. Okay, so we have a question from Christian D68 from France. Greg, when I recorded automation with R and W, is it only working when R is on, or are the changes always working? So when R is on, that allows the automation to be read. So we can think of W for write, R for read automation. So if you don't have, you could have the automation written. So let's say if I want to go to the bass track here, and let's say I just want to automate the bass. So by default, when I click on this, probably if you're automating, you want it to be read. All right, so now let me just change the. So if I don't want the automation to be followed, I could just click on the R. And now it won't follow the automation. When I click on the R, it will. So it says, and once recorded, can I change with the CC121 fader? So let's say if I have automation here. So let's say I've drawn in automation. I want to use the CC121 fader. So I will come right over here. Let's just say... Okay, so let's say I have my CC121 here. So if I wanted to make this overall louder, softer. If we go into your automation panel, sorry for hitting it wrong, and I'll just put this into trim mode, and I'll just have this trim manually. So now that I've activated trim mode, so just by right here, we can see our automation. So now as I move down or move up, so you see almost two lines going on. So I could take that existing automation, and then once we go into trim, I could just say on leaving trim mode. So now we'll see kind of the automation adjust. And what that does is it uses, the value of the fader that's here. And now once it's in trim, I could just bring everything up. So, and then, and a lot of times people would just have this set to automatically on leaving trim mode or on pass end. And that will just allow you to kind of increase or decrease the overall velocity, or the overall automation. So let's say I have that, I put it into trim mode. So just kind of keep my, and then once you leave trim mode, that could automatically just raise and lower the velocity just by how much you raised or lowered the fader. So give that a try, experiment with trim mode. And then you could, increase or decrease existing automation by using just the, by a fader, moving it up or down. Okay, so we have automation question. How can I increase or decrease the volume of a complete track which has automation in it? So, let's say if I wanted to take, the full automation here, and let me just take it out of trim mode. All right, so if I have a lot of automation on a particular track, if you just select all the automation, you could just go to the center and just bring it all down. You could also select all the automation and you'll see the value here, and you could increase or decrease the value from the info line in the upper left-hand corner. And you could bring all of your automation up or down just like that. You could also do it with the Project Logical Editor, but those would probably be a little more straightforward. All right, great to see Lawrence from Rhode Island. Glad you could join us today. All right, so we just saw a question. I lost it, but just scrolling back up about, can you show the comping feature? Let me just find where it is. Okay, so we'll show the comping feature. All right, so I found my place. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel or you're a new user, make sure you subscribe as well. And that enables us to continue to do these live streams. Okay, so let's say I've recorded just like a bass line. I recorded 8 measures, and I put it into like a cycle record mode. I just recorded pass after pass, so it would just kind of loop, and I would do performance 1, and when I get to the end, it would do performance 2. So this is kind of one long recording that is actually kind of broken down into lanes, and we could enable lanes by clicking on this icon here. So as we see our different lanes, these will each be different takes. So if I wanted to grab what we call the comp tool, I could select different performances and listen to them. Now, if I wanted to take just a portion from different performances, we could use the comp tool, which looks like the little hand, and I could just hover over and I could just select, again, these different performances. And I say, oh, I wanted to go to this one instead. And if you wanted to, you could just come over here and listen to the different ones and say, oh, I really wanted this one instead. And you could also just hold down kind of like your Alt and Control or Command Option and slip the event. So anytime that we select, we kind of see it in this master part. And so if we've now done our comp, we could have all those different comps all handled directly just right there without any problem. So that's quick ways how to do quick comping. Okay, so just see, Greg, have you contemplated demonstrating the setup in Cubase 11 Demo 4? So I meant to download that project earlier, but I forgot to. So if you want to send me a quick email, like a brain cramp reminder, but I could download it for Tuesday's live stream. But let me know if there's anything in particular that you wanted to see within that demo project. I may be able to help you with that. We have a question. Can a sample editor match the grid as far as note value resolution? So I don't think that it will do, and I know the development team is aware of this, but if you want to, so if we have everything kind of set up for us here, let's say within the sample editor, so we could see kind of our grids. So let's say if we wanted to go to like our hit points, but as we see the grid, so it doesn't currently show like triplets in the grid, but you can have it, you know, match the grid except for triplets. And hopefully we'll see that coming soon. I know I've passed it on to many of the people for the developers and product planning people. All right, so we see Peter joining from Montreal, Canada. You don't have to worry if you're late. We're just glad that you could join us for the live stream. Okay, so we see how to send reverb to singer headphone in vocal room. Thanks. So, you know, an easy way of doing that is just to, so let's say if we go to our control room, and we'll come over here to the main. So let's say we're going to our singer's headphone mix. You can now just click over here to inserts and the bottom tab, and then you could just add plugins that are dedicated to that particular headphone mix. So if you wanted to just add a quick reverb there, you could do it like that and just adjust the mix level, you know, between. So you may have to adjust the mix level between the balance signal, but you could just load it up as an insert directly in So select their headphone mix and go to inserts at the bottom. Then you could do that. If you have a Steinberg interface, like a UR series, you could actually have the reverb being generated by the unit itself, and they could hear and monitor that without having to use the control room. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski in Dorco Elements, is it actually easier to compose in Dorco Elements than Cubase, or is it just my newbie imagination? With Nuendo Cubase Pro, I have all the VSTIs needed. So I would really say it depends on your compositional style. You know, there's some people that want to compose, you know, by playing parts in and maybe seeing music or envisioning it in their head, and they just kind of play, and maybe it's a stream of conscious thing. And some people, when they compose, you know, are very traditional and they have a blank score and they write the notes in like that. Both methods are totally viable. And, you know, if you finished a project and you get your composition done, how you get there doesn't really matter. A lot of people, you know, I think that most people, if you're composing to picture, you know, will find it much easier starting in a DAW as opposed to a notation. But, you know, if you're doing maybe, you know, I'm just composing for a brass quartet or a brass quintet, that, you know, those people may feel more comfortable in a notation environment. So it's really, you know, there are different approaches, and that's why we make and produce both, you know, those types of programs together. Okay, so we have a question from John Costigan. So, hello, Greg. I hope you're well. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Which editing functions, sample editor for one, should I make a copy of the original track for safety, version 10.53, Windows 10 PC? So, you know, the only time, and the one time that I usually do it, and it may be primarily for demonstration purposes, like when I do vocal editing, I may make a separate file to work with just in case, because that's the only time I've really found the need personally to go back, like if I was doing very audio editing. So a lot of times what I do, if I'm doing very audio, and let me just find a vocal project here. So, you know, sometimes you may have a file that's been edited for, you know, breaths and, you know, crossfades and punch-ins and stuff like that. So what I often do, you know, where maybe these are, you know, it's a comp of, you know, 26 different vocal performances. So often the only time that I tend to do this, you know, is for vocal editing. So I will come over here and I'll just right click and I'll duplicate the tracks. And then often I will just go to the audio and bounce selection. So I have all of my original edits here, but now I have kind of a, you know, just one file. Because if you're doing like a lot of vocal editing, it could be that you double click and you do very audio editing on this. And when you go to a different file, you may have to do an analysis of each edit, each individual part. But once I kind of have, you know, some rough edits done, that way I could just double click and do all of my very audio editing using just one part where everything is kind of consolidated into one event where I'm not switching between different events. So that's the only time that I personally, just from a convenience sake rather, will kind of just, you know, consolidate these and treat them a bit differently, just in very audio editing. I haven't really ever done it myself in other editing tasks, but maybe others have. All right, so it's great to see Randy on the live stream. Glad you could join us. All right, so we see, is there a way to view insert sends in the track header of every track at the same time? That would be very fast to me without having to go back and forth between windows. So what a lot of people do is like, okay, I'm here. If I see my faders here, I could have sends and inserts. So I'm just going to hold down, my all you have to do is hold down Control or Command, and this way, whatever track I'm on, I could just see my sends and inserts, and this will be for audio tracks, and you could have it set up for as a default view for MIDI tracks. So I could adjust my fader here. I can see all my inserts, and I can see all my sends just in one particular view quite easily. So let me know if that works for you. So again, just to have more than one aspect open, you could click on inserts here, and let's say hold down Control or Command and click on sends, and both of those will kind of stay open for you. All right, so we have a question. Hi, how can I remove the bottom mixers windows from my main workspace? You could just come right here in the upper right-hand corner, and all you have to do is just click directly there. And it could be that when you double click that it may open that, and to stop that from happening, go to editors, and you can say double click opens in separate window, double click opens in separate window, hit apply. So now when this is closed, we could double click and it's going to open in a separate window. I hit F3, it's going to open in a separate window. I double click, it'll open in a separate window, but just close that. You could just hit that icon and again go to the preference under editors and just choose double click opens in a window. So to see, how is it possible to have the color window floating when coloring tracks and events? So I think if you just let's see if we could, I think maybe so at this point you could just kind of keep, let's see if that will. So it looks like as soon as you click here to colors, let's just see if it's. I think if we leave this open, and you can't really do too much. So you might just have to leave this open. But I think if you just have, I thought that there might have been a way to, sorry, let me just, to see the colors. But, another method that I guess you might be able to leave, let's see if we could leave a project. Logical is probably isn't what you want to do. But here you could also just colorize. And you could leave that open, but it's probably not what you necessarily want to do. And you could apply that to whatever tracks or events are selected. You see John Costigan showing off with his clever Spanish writing to Pablo. So we see Michael is fluent in Google Translate, so that's good. All right, so we see question. I have the controller CC121. Is it possible to set and configure on it some knobs for the section pre on the editor channel panel? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so any time that you hover over a particular parameter, you could just, use the AI knob. So you could do that very easily, just kind of using the AI knob to hover. And that's, the most beautiful thing of the CC121 is the AI knob. As you're working with this, we could probably also, if you hit the... Let me just get it's the all bypass and EQ type buttons. That will place the CC121 into quick control mode. So if you wanted to just come over here and learn. So let's say if I now want to come here and let's go to parameter 3. Then I could use my top rows of encoders directly here for, from my quick controls for the EQ pre section as well. So you could utilize it with quick controls or using the AI knob. All right, so we have Patrice checking in from Portland, Maine. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a quick question. Is there any way to copy the automation with each block when pasting a new block? I have to do it separately. Sorry for a novice question here. Okay, so let's say I have this little block here, and it has automation. Okay, and let's say I want, I'll just so to copy the automation with each block. So now that I have this selected, I think if you go to edit, there's a parameter that says automation follows events. So if I have that unchecked, and I duplicate this particular event. Sorry for hitting the wrong key. We don't see the automation carry over with that. So I have this event selected. I go to edit. I make sure that automation follows events is on by default, I believe. And now when I do that, the automation will just automatically carry over with the part. So if I copy it, just Control or Command C, and paste it, Control or Command V, the automation is automatically moved with the event. So just make sure that under the edit menu that automation follows events is checked. Okay, so we just see how I've been applying things learned here to a test project. I know I now have a song with MIDI parts pointing to Hallian, Groove Agent, and Reason Kong. What's the best way to render them to audio? So it's probably just going to be render in place. So let's say if I just want it to come over, and I'll just quickly create a new project here. So let's add some instruments. So let's say a retro log part. And let's add a groove agent. Okay, so it's all right. So let's say I just have virtual instruments. I want to turn them into audio. You know, you could select the event or select the tracks. But if you want to come here, you know, I could, and let's say I select the events. I go to edit, and then we'll just say render in place. And here I could choose to, so if I just do that, it will then render those as audio, just like that. If you, and you have different options, which I should point out. So if we go to our render settings, we could now say, okay, I want these as separate little blocks to match the arrangement, or I could have them last until the next event starts, or all as one event. I could include different processing. We could add tails. We could, you know, change the rendered folder. But if I just have the track selected, so let's say I have these two parts going to virtual instruments, and I go to my render settings, you know, I could have these automatically muted. What I can do with the source tracks is, or I could just choose to disable the source tracks, and now it'll just render those out, and we'll see the source tracks will immediately just disappear from you. So just go to edit to render in place, and you can do that across multiple events quite easily. And that's one of the big advantages over like freezing tracks as well. All right, so just see a question: how to connect Cubase to Cubasis. So we can think of Cubasis as going to be like its own separate DAW, so it's its own DAW. It's not necessary. Try not to think of it as an instrument for Cubase, but the intention is like you could get started. And I just got Cubase for my Samsung phone today, but you could just, as you're working with it, you know, the intention is for you to kind of start with Cubasis. And then if you wanted to take the project into Cubase, if you need to do more plugins and more sophisticated automation, that you could just come over here to import Cubasis project. So at that point, it could just simply take the project, and this is just a little utility that you would download. So you could take your Cubasis project and just load that directly into Cubase and do more stuff in Cubase if needed, but they're not really intended to work in sync or to treat Cubasis as an instrument for Cubase. So, all right, so I see lots of discussion on nachos. All right, so once again, if you learned something, make sure that you hit the like button, and we'll just, and if you want to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. It's always a great time. All right, just finding my spot in the discussion field. All right, so I found my spot. So sorry for the delay. Okay, so we just see a question. Any way to save a group of tracks as a preset? I have an instrument track with multiple MIDI tracks routed to it, and I'd like to be able to save the tracks as a group I can import into other projects. So if you wanted to, you could just, let's say, I'll undo what I just did. So let's say I have these two tracks. We could now at this point export selected tracks. So I'll say, let's copy the media files. I'll hit OK. So this is from Chiz. Okay, and now going to any other project, I can come right over here and say I want to import a track archive. So you export selected tracks and import a track archive. So it could be a little odd nomenclature. And at this point, I could just select all, and that will import my instruments for me. So just so when you go to my VST instruments, I can see the instruments have been doubled. If you just save it as a project, you could also come over here and say, okay, I just want to import tracks from project. So I could say, okay, I wanted to take this project and I wanted to import, the voiceover and the brass parts. And I could just come right over here and I could import, all of any, so if you save it as a project, you could import those particular tracks from a project as well. Okay, we just see how to recording with Cubase with many inputs. So all you have to do is come over here to your studio menu, to your studio connections. Make sure that you have all of the inputs and here, if you have an audio interface that's set up for, if you have 8 analog inputs or 100 analog inputs. So when you go to preset, like if you have 8 analog inputs, you'll have a choice of 4 stereo or 2 times mono or 8 mono. So you'll have presets here. And then, once you have the available inputs for your audio interface, all you have to do is, you could easily assign them to your channel. So, it's no problem recording, I've recorded 128 tracks into Cubase many times. So it just, whatever your audio interface has the inputs for, that's what Cubase will capture at once. And I just see also he has a PreSonus USB. So depending on your USB interface, if you have, just define your inputs. So you could just come over here and say, okay, I want to add bus. So I wanted to have, maybe 16 mono inputs, hit add track, and now you could assign these to whatever input that you have. I just have a stereo in interface, but if you have 2 inputs on your audio interface, you're not going to be able to record 4 different sources simultaneously or 8 tracks simultaneously. It's really how many inputs your particular interface has. Okay, so I see asking again about the removing the lower zone. So I think we covered that previously. All right, reading through all the great discussion. So just a quick time reference. I should have done this. I'm at an hour and 27 minutes from the start of the Hangout into questions. Sorry for not doing that earlier. So if you're on East Coast time in the U.S., I'm at 2:27 p.m. Okay, so we see a question from John Tyler. Tips and tricks for getting an accurate tempo map of pre-recorded tracks, please. More importantly, how do I lock the audio so it doesn't get warped when messing up the tempo track? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say I have nothing with no correlation with the tempo. So I'm just going to select the event here, go to my project menu, and choose tempo detection. All right, now it will take you into this mode, and it activates this mode. So if you actually hear or see something that where maybe it didn't get detected, you could actually see this little icon here, and this puts you into what's called a time warp tool. And what you could do with the time warp tool is you say, oh, this is the downbeat here, not here. They just kind of rushed it. You could just say, measure 61 should be right here on that grid. And this will, once we do this, that will do the analysis further down the line and do a reanalysis of it. So you could manually do it using the time warp tool, just coming over here and dragging, or just simply, let Cubase do the hard work for you. Once that it's created this, we could now come over here, like there may be, if we have a pickup note where this is the downbeat. So I'm going to just come here in my signature track, because Cubase will give us a signature track. So right now we see that this particular tempo map has been created from this file. And if I don't want it to move or adjust, all you have to do is to not place it into musical mode. So if it's set to musical mode, don't do that. Just set it to not musical mode, because we want this to stay the same. And if I wanted like another file, like a drum loop, to follow this particular file, so let's say, so I want to take that, and let's go ahead and we'll drop in that drum loop, and I want it to start right at the downbeat here. So if I want this to be, in musical mode, because if this isn't in musical mode, this is going to play at its tempo. I don't want this to change. I want this to follow that. So if it's not in musical mode, I drop it in. That doesn't make much sense. But if I just click on musical mode for the particular event, as I come over here, now this will stretch and speed up and slow down following. And then if I just wanted to duplicate that, so if you don't want it to switch, all you have to do is just make sure that that track that you derive the tempo map from is not in musical mode. So give that a try. Okay, so we just see, why isn't the soft E license usable across multiple machines? So, the soft E license is actually going to be tied to the particular machine. So that's why, it's not used. If you wanted to migrate between multiple machines, you could transfer the soft E license to a USB licenser and move it between different machines. All right, so we just see, hey, big shout out to the group who timestamped the questions for when I can't be here live. So glad I bought Cubase. So yeah, I usually, it seemed like a good idea for me to do the live streams on Fridays, but I spend my Friday nights probably till like 10 p.m. Afterwards, I usually take a quick dinner break and come back and then basically rewatch the live stream and do all the timestamp indexes. And luckily people like Jan from CubaseIndex.com have put it all into kind of a centralized area as well. So, but yeah, it takes a little time, but I think it's worth the investment of my time so that people can navigate quickly and there's kind of a record of topics that have been covered. All right, excuse me 1 second. My son is knocking. All right, I'm back. Sorry for the interruption. I had to fix the TV for my son real quick. Okay. Okay, so we see from Chiz, is there a Cubase related Discord or something? Yeah, check out the Cubase Nation Discord. So I think probably Jazz Dude or H&K could give you a link to that. All right, so we have Una Memento from Finland. Thanks for joining us. Reading through comments. All right, so we have Weez on Music checking in from Orlando. Thanks for joining. All right, so we just see, does Cubase have a built-in sampler like for sampling from CDs and vinyl? So if you have CDs, really all you have to do, if you wanted to import the CD is you could just choose to import an audio CD. Any audio that's been recorded into Cubase, there is a sampler track, so you could drag and drop the audio right into a sampler track and be able to kind of manipulate it and treat it like a sampler. So you could record any audio source right in if you wanted to, treat with it in the sampler, or if you wanted to take this into a dedicated drum sampler like Groove Agent as well. I could just take this particular loop and drop it onto a pad and slice and be able to take, and even within the sampler track, I could come over here and choose to do slices as well. So now if I just wanted to play different parts, to kind of do chops and stuff like that very easily. So anything that's audio, you could, that's been recorded in the Cubase, you could just drag and drop it right in. If you wanted to do more sophisticated sampling, you could also just set up an audio input into instruments like the full version of Groove Agent or the full Hallian 6, so that once you come over here, we could just say, you're going to have a whole recording option so that you could sample directly into this, but those programs are sold separately. But any audio that's recorded in Cubase, you could manipulate it in a sampler with either Groove Agent or the sampler track. And we see, does Cubase Elements 10 have a built-in sampler like for sampling from CDs and vinyl? So again, it's just, recording directly in or dropping it right into the sampler track. All right, so we see my UR44 series makes a noise when set up as my audio interface, even if I'm not recording with it. Is there a way to stop the annoying noise? So I'm not sure if you could describe the noise. So sometimes I know with the MR816, like the first Steinberg and Yamaha interface that was released, that, when you have the gain all the way up, that the MR816 was actually set to be, basically 6 dB over 0, whereas a lot of interfaces stop at 0. So there may be some added noise if you go above 0. So make sure that you have it set. Like if you come to your hardware setup, let me see if there's one over here, but you could, just, make sure that when you go to the little utility that you have the master volume set to 0 dB and not louder. If it's kind of a hissing noise, if it's some other noise, let me know. If you could describe what kind of noise it is. All right, so you see Jazz Dude wants people to smash the like button. And thanks for all the new attendees for joining us. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, we usually do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. All right, so we see that from Levi Keller. Thanks for, I guess, viewing inserts and sends in the inspector for the same time. At the same time, helps a lot. We see from John Costigan. Thanks, Greg. My editing comfort level just went up and my fear coefficient plummeted. So you see, you could say that without Google Translate. You're so smart. So we see, hello, there's any 5.1 or 7.1 or Atmos reverb in Cubase, or can you suggest? So if if I come here, once we add Cubase doesn't support Atmos, but Cubase will do up to 5.1. So if I wanted to add an effects channel track, so any VST3 plugin by design can come over here. So let's say if I wanted to go to my Reverence reverb, so I could just add an effects channel track. And most of the time we think of the configuration as being stereo, but if I wanted it to be 5.1, and let me just add a 5.1 output in my buses. So I'll just add a 5.1 out here. So I'm just going to add an effects channel track of our reverb. So that, VST3 plugins can automatically scale to whatever surround configuration you're in. And once you're in the presets, you often will see like an SR, and that's an actual surround convolution impulse. So that way, the effect sends. So, Dolby Atmos is, probably a bit different because it's not a fixed number of channels, but, if you put it into like a 714 bus, you could do that and it will scale across. So, you already have the functionality found in Cubase Pro with its surround support. All right, so we see that Mike Teams is working with Control Room and his Aviom. So if you need help configuring that, let me know. I've set up the Aviom systems for a number of different people. Okay, so I just see, Greg, I couldn't get the sound card to work on Cubase when I had Dorco Elements open. Is it the release? Excuse me. Is it the release driver in background setting, or is there interference? Close Dorco, Cubase needed to restart. So it's probably just going to be the, the background. So if you come over here to the audio system and just release driver when the application is in the background, but I go back and forth with Cubase and Dorco all the time, so it's not a problem. And I know you have the MR816s, as do I. So, all right, so we have Prince Ackersaw from Perth, Australia. Thanks so much for the information on closing the bottom window of my workspace. Thank you for joining us all the way from Australia. You realize it's like super late there, or very, very early. So thank you for taking the time and staying up and joining. All right, so we see Space Caller saying, Greg, you're wonderful. Thanks for the CC121 trick. So I just see from Daryl, hey, Greg and Christoph, I recently opened up the color pad and it's floating on my desktop. How I did it, I don't know, but it can stay open. I'm new to this whole thing. So yeah, I remember it kind of staying open somehow. So but I'll see if it comes back to me later. All right, and Jazz Dude is very nice to mention that there is currently a Cubase promotion going on. So if you've waited for the summer Cubase promotion, there's a 40% off on updates and upgrades to Cubase 11 and cross grades from other DAWs. So make sure you take advantage of that. I think it's ending August 1st. So make sure that you actually take advantage of that. Okay, so I would like to know if there's an extensive video tutorial on the explanation of control room functions, especially when it comes to cutting Vox. So I know when the mixer changed significantly, I believe that was in Cubase 7, that, I did, there's probably like a 10-minute video just on the control room functionality, and it's probably on the Steinberg YouTube channel. So there is one that's available there. Okay, so I never seem to be able to match the mic input to the recorded Vox track. So many problems, latency, EQing, etc. For once, I'd like to cut a Vox, and then when I play it back, it's exactly the same without constant ticking of the monitoring button. So probably what you should do is, if you want it to, so if you don't want to constantly manually set the monitoring mode, go to your preferences and under VST. Just come right over here and you'll see auto monitoring style. It's probably set to manual. Set that to tape machine style, and that will probably make the whole where you won't have to go back and forth. If you're working with a lot of plugins, like as you're cutting vocals, a lot of people tend not to try to use plugins because it could be kind of masking problems, maybe with mic technique that you're trying to make up for with an EQ, but try to get the source sounding good. But once you have that auto monitoring style, I could come over here and let's say just add a track. So I have this track like record enabled. Let me just add a stereo track here really quick because So I have this, I go to hit record, and let's say now when I stop recording, that, once you have the auto, as you're doing punch-ins, that, you could just simply come right over here and you see as you play, you don't have to. I punch in, then let's say I punch out, you notice that the monitoring is disengaged when we're not actually recording. So try switching that preference under VST to tape machine style. Okay, so you just see, thanks for the automation follows events answer going to save me so much time. So, all right, lost my space. Okay. So I just see, will Cubase recognize my PreSonus fader port? So I believe it will, but I think like maybe the first generation doesn't work in like, contemporary computers. But it should see it as long as it's being, available to use in the operating system. I believe it just kind of uses like a subset of Mackie control. So. So I just see from Michael Teams saying that CC121, the screen will not respond to the movement of the CC121. So look in the manual, Michael, but you can calibrate the fader. I forget like the, towards the very back of the manual, there is a procedure to calibrate the fader. So make sure that you've done that as well. Okay, so we have a question. After installing a third-party virtual instrument, I cannot find them. How can I find on my computer and input them in Cubase? So, if it's going to be a VST3 plugin, so one, if you have the option, it's Cubase for many years won't utilize 32-bit plugins, but make sure that's a 64-bit plugin. You could go to your if it's a VST2 plugin, you may have to, if we go to the plugin manager, so we go to the VST plugin manager, you'll see this little settings cogwheel here. Make sure that you have this VST2 plugin path setting. So what you want to do is click on the plus sign and find the folder where those plugins are installed to, because Cubase just, so you may have to just tell Cubase what folder to look for those plugins. And once you have where the plugin files on Windows, it'll be like a .dll extension. At that point, hit refresh and you should see all of your available plugins right there. But just click right here in the settings cogwheel in the lower left-hand corner. And at that point, you could see the folders and make sure that it's VST2 plugins, that it's there, then Cubase should be able to see it. All right, so we see, I think it's Jay from Connecticut. I'm able to change the color of the main area and the track. However, there's no way in the preferences to change the color of background behind the tracks. Color option, run amok. Okay, so let's say, just make sure. So let's say if I have these particular tracks colored here. So let's say, okay. So, just there's no way in the preferences menu to change the color of the background behind the tracks. All right, so if you come over here, so if it's like this workspace, this area, if you want to change the color, Jay, come over here to preferences and go to color schemes, and then you can see project area background. So you could double click here and let's just make this, 46, or we'll just raise this up here. So now we do that, we could change the background. So if that's what you want to do, it's just going to be found under the project area background. So let's say if I just come here, so you could change that. If it's on the actual event itself, I think you go under event display. And once you're in here, we could choose to say, okay, you wanted the event handling opacity. So now if I adjust that, excuse me, or let's say the event opacity, I could now just hit apply, and you could change the background of the part directly there as well to however you want. So if you wanted to see like the grid underneath, you could just hit apply, And I know some people, love to do their editing here so that they could see the transients directly on the grid. So those are a couple ways, Jay. Let me know if that works for you. I'll just go back to defaults. So those are two different backgrounds. All right, so we have Danielle checking in from Munich in Germany. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question. How can I merge two separate projects into one in Cubase 11? Okay, so let's say I have this, and I want to move my cursor here. So, one way is to, let's say I have a project open here. I could just take this and drag and drop and have my audio files directly there. I could also choose to, let's say at the end of this piece, I want to go to import tracks from project. So let's say I wanted to import these particular tracks. I will come over here. I could select folders or an entire track. So let's say I wanted these to import, and I could import them to new tracks. But if you wanted to actually, if you had like a template and you had bass and kick in multiple projects, you could also click on select matching. So once I do this and we could import the events or parts or just a channel, we could also include or exclude the automation. I hit OK, and I could take all of those tracks and just merge those two projects together. So there's several different ways. You could drag and drop or use the import tracks from project function. Okay, so I just see from William Baker, thanks for the previous answer. Is it normal to have to add Houston each time Cubase 11 is opened? And you're saying it remembers my settings. So I haven't connected my Houston in a while, but I think it should stick. So I'm not sure if it's, maybe it's, check to make sure that the MIDI interface connections aren't changing, but I think it should be. I don't think would be typical that you would have to add to Houston each time. So maybe if you start off with let's say if you start off with a template that has the Houston, see if that makes a difference. All right, so we have Alex Patterson checking in from Scotland. Thanks for joining us. He's just spent today upgrading to 11 Pro from 10.5. He needs to go back to watch from the start when it finishes. So that's great. Thanks. Okay, so we have another question from ProWash DFW. I think it's Randy. Can I use my Tascam US 2400 controller with Cubase? So yeah, that basically is just working as 3 Mackie controls, kind of all tied together. So you go to your studio setup, click on the plus, and just add 3 Mackie controls, and you may have to figure out which one. I believe, I'm not sure if it's, and that's taking into consideration that it has like a Windows 10 driver or a current Mac OS driver that you're using. If not, you may have to use a MIDI port and MIDI interfaces for the communication. But I think you're going to be in good shape with that. All right, so you see a nice comment from Tim Weinheimer. Thanks, Greg, for all your hard work in teaching us Cubase. Greg is a legend, so thank you for that. It's very kind. I'm an Oompa Loompa in a world of Willy Wonkas. So, okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to write CC data after live recording? I would like to change the CC data with connected MIDI devices while playing, like automation and mixer, no pencil tool, no editing. All right, so let's come over here. Just add a quick instrument track. All right, I'll just do a quick kind of orchestral. All right, so many times when we use orchestral instruments, we may need to, you may not hear it necessarily until you write CC data in. So let's say, all right, so let me just see if we could get this to switch via. All right, so I'll just go ahead and record some horn parts in here. All right, so say. All right, so let's see if I. All right, so I have this. So now there's different MIDI record modes. So we could just choose to merge data. So a lot of times when we say new parts, which is the default behavior, I can come here and let's record. And what it does is it's basically puts the new recording directly on top of the other one. But probably the easiest way I found is to just go to the MIDI record mode and choose merge. So now I will just come here, and as I record my modulation wheel, that data is now just merged in, and I come over here, you could see my modulation data that I just recorded in. So that way, just, when you go to your MIDI record mode here, just try set it to merge as opposed to new parts, and then that will just put the MIDI CC data directly in the existing part. All right, so we see a nice comment from Jeff Sabelski. Thanks, Greg. All your efforts and so many others' efforts as well makes this an unfathomably amazing and thoughtful gift to our community. So yeah, I think it's very fortunate that we have an amazing group of people. I look forward to these twice a week doing them, and even after doing it since March of last year, twice a week, it's still fun and engaging for me. And I appreciate, virtually hanging out with people throughout the whole world twice a week. So, all right. So we just see from Christian D68, Cubase 11, an example in artificial intelligence, Greg's brain in one software. It's a joke, but Greg, thank you so much for sharing 30 years of competence. So, yeah, I just get to share what the product planning and developers do. They're really the smart ones, and they make me look good. So I'm fortunate for that. All right, wonderful that we see Sable Winters joining us. It's always better when Sable's here with us. All right, so we have Gareth. Wonderful to have Gareth on the live stream. Anyone know why my iRig keys MIDI control keyboard would cause Cubase to freeze when it starts up? So make sure, just out of curiosity, when you are doing that, so if you're just using it as a straight MIDI controller, usually MIDI controllers don't really cause anything to hang, but just, look to make sure, because a lot of times you may configure a MIDI controller for transport controls via like a Mackie protocol and faders and the keys from a different one. Make sure that maybe you don't have like the remote control that the iRig is being defined as maybe a different as a controller and like a control surface and a MIDI controller, or that it's not being kind of utilized multiply. Some controllers don't like doing that. It likes to be either one or the other, or that you have like maybe the quick controls, it's configured accidentally for your track quick controls or your VST quick controls. So you can maybe try to set these to not connected and see if that reboots. But generally, most MIDI interfaces or most MIDI controllers don't cause it to start unless it's, maybe the drivers aren't installed correctly. So, all right, we see Pablo's going out for dinner. All right, so we see does Profile Manager allow me to port color and menu setup and or export them so that I could place them on my desktop and or back on USB in case of system full recovering or system fail requiring reinstall? Please demo. So generally, the Profile Manager doesn't include the colors. So the colors are kind of not global, but the colors are on a color by or are set at the project level. So if you wanted to archive them, just simply save a project that's utilizing those color schemes, and it could have just nothing in it, but just save a project, and then you could import those project colors. So just, save it within a project, and then the colors will migrate within the project. Okay, so I see Christopher is like Shift Alt or Option plus C for the color command, I think. Okay. Yes, thank you for that. All right, he alleviated my brain cramp. See, it's always nice when I have my brain cramp. That other people can chime in. So if you want the color windows to be floating, so it's Alt or Option plus Shift C. And then you could leave the color windows kind of constantly available to use. So thank you for the keyboard shortcut reminder, Christoph. Much appreciated. He gets the gold star for the live stream today. Okay, so we see from Jeff Zabelski, Greg, using Dorco Elements, do you have use of the CC121 in project windows? It doesn't do anything normal, but some buttons close, chromatic tones function, channel select, different pitches. So I think that Dorco isn't going to have real support for for the for CC121, a lot of times you don't really think of control surfaces for notation programs, but maybe something like a Stream Deck could be a really slick option for some Dorco functionality. And when you see those functions, those may be just triggering, like when you hit function buttons, those may be just, passing on like a keyboard shortcut, like that you would press from your computer keyboard. And that's why you may see some functions. Okay, so we see from Foundations Education, this is Solomon from Mexico. Sorry to ask, but is it possible to have Cubase color scheme look like Logic Pro? Any ways of importing XML files to do so? Thanks for your tutorials. They're great. So I don't think it's going to, obviously you do two programs or, different programs. So I don't think that there's going to be any way to take an XML file from Logic into Cubase. I mean, XML is just, you think of it as more of a container file. But if you, have a specific screenshot, I may be able to kind of mimic a lot of the control functionality because a lot of the design is pretty, is pretty customizable. So if you have like a screenshot, I might be able to work on something for you if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so just people that are on the time. So I'm currently in the questions at 3:30 p.m., which was 2.5 hours after the live stream started. So just a quick time reference for people. Okay, so we have a question. What's the best way to use MIDI drum files packs with Groove Agent 5, some from Unison or third party? So really anything that you just drop into the project window will just load up. So all you have to do is just drag and drop a MIDI file right into the project window. Some may, not map perfectly, so you may have to remap some of the pitches so that it's playing like the right toms or hi-hat sounds or cymbals. But once you have Groove Agent, there's a number of expansion kits that you can get, like probably one of my favorite ones is Simon Phillips drums or the Marco Miniman drums are pretty phenomenal. So there's lots of different, third-party expansions. Like, here's a Simon Phillips. If you want the original Groove Agent 1, the kit. So there's a number of, if you want Fusion. So these are all, like pretty phenomenal drum kits. And when you get these kits, you could actually have these drummers that have played the different patterns for you. So if I just wanted to come here, but one thing that a lot of people miss is if you click on this little folder icon, you can now come over here to style. So say I want that sound, but I actually wanted the style to come from Simon Phillips. So I could just come over here, say, okay, I want a Latin groove. So this is a Simon Phillips pattern that's being played back in this kit. So I could just come over here. So, investing in a lot of the additional Groove Agent content, you could have access to, many wonderful styles that are a bit more interactive, where you could, choose different levels of complexity and dynamics. That gives you a lot more flexibility and more musicality than maybe just a standard, MIDI file that you would get from a particular instrument, like a generic drum pattern MIDI file. So yeah, and there's lots of great stuff for Groove Agent that's already there. And we see TY's from Germantown, Maryland, so not far from me, in between Washington and Frederick there. Washington, D.C. and Frederick, Maryland. All right, so I just see hello, scrolling in mixer page is very tricky. I have to place my cursor between plugins to avoid making changes to the built-in plugins. Is that normal? So once again, when you're kind of working with, a lot of different material, different sources, realize that, the operating system can allow you to control different functions. So when I'm scrolling in the mixer window, I would probably just go to the bottom area here and just use my mouse scroll wheel so that I'm not over a pan, I'm not over parameters where okay, I just turned on the EQ and I'm just adjusting. So think that when you're scrolling, just go for the bottom control, and then you could scroll without fear of adjusting any parameters. All right, so I see I've been rewarded with 3 scoops of German chocolate cake ice cream from Michael Teams. I need it for my throat. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Sable Winters. Open the MIDI file, empty VSTI panel, need instruments per track, data visible in each track, I/O controller, MPK88 ports active, audio Focusrite active. How to recover to repopulate VSTI panel. So, Sable, the one thing you do when you're working with MIDI files is just go to your preferences. And if you come directly to under MIDI, you'll see MIDI file. Here you can, so it sounds like it's opening up without any instruments loaded. So if you want it to automatically load up like a general MIDI sound set, just choose Howling Sonic SE Multi-Timbral as destination. So, and what this will do is this will automatically load up a general MIDI bank of Howling Sonic SE so that you will have sounds that work with it. So just just set that preference right there for on destination, and this is usually the default preference, but just choose Howling Sonic SE Multi-Timbral, and then when you import the MIDI file, it should populate sounds for you so you could hear it immediately. Okay, we see Pablo is back from dinner. All right, so I just see, how can I create those cycle markers I see in your Zoom tutorial? So if I'm here and I just want to create quick cycle markers, so I'm going to add a marker track. Okay, and I often will use just kind of the range tool. So I'll just kind of select a range in the markers, and then if you just click here, and you can do this with the keyboard shortcut, you can say insert. Let me just undo that. So what I'm going to do now is just move that. I'm going to hit the letter P, and then the cycle markers will be set around the left and right locators. And now I could just come here, hit the letter P, cycle marker, P, insert cycle marker. So, and you could also do this like, based on events. So you say, okay, I want a cycle marker, let's say based on this event here. So if I just say, okay, I want a cycle marker based on that, hit P, and then just click on the add cycle marker icon, and that will add your cycle markers just like that. So yeah, so I'm just seeing Gareth. Maybe it's just an issue with the iRig driver plus Cubase, why it's kind of causing problems. So yeah, I mean, it can't hurt to reinstall it if it's, sometimes also if it's connected to a hub, see if it makes a difference. If if it's currently connected to a hub, if it is, if you connect it directly to the machine, if that makes a difference. All right, I see Gareth is saying Lola says hi, Greg. So say hi back. And as Pablo says, hola, Lola. All right. Okay, so just see, I don't know how to use the RDSer. I guess it's just a deesser. So let's take a look. I think I may have an annoyingly sibilant file that I can import. Just thanks again for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. And we'll be doing the next live stream on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern time. All right, so I'm going to... Okay, so let's say if I have kind of a sibilant.
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the symbol 0, the principle of position, and the concept of base.
All right, so we have some sibilant issues with that. So
in language,
I'm going to just go to, and we could run the deesser from the channel strip under tools. So, what this will do basically is, we could have kind of an abbreviated version of this, and we could come over here. So let's say, okay, just
in
wanted
language,
to.
Infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the symbol 0, the principle of position, and the concept of base.
So, and if you wanted to run it as kind of its own plugin, so let's say we'll just go over here under dynamics. And so what it's going to do is you want to find kind of like the, annoying
in language,
frequency
infinitely
parts.
many words can be written with a small set of letters.
And I'll just put
In
this into a
arithmetic,
loop.
infinitely many numbers can be composed
And here you could
from
have
just
kind
a few
of,
digits
for
with the help of
female
the symbol
voice.
0, the principle of position, and the concept of base. In language, infinitely
So that's just kind of soloing different.
help of
So
the
you can
symbol
kind of isolate.
0, the principle of position, and the concept of base.
So
In
at this point,
language,
we could just.
infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the symbol 0, the principle with the help of the symbol 0, the principle of position, and the concept of base.
So see, that's a lot more tolerable for the sibilances. All right, so we see from Gareth that Voodoo Leche and a Dark Emerald Book of Ishtar streaming release date's going to be August 1st. So looking forward to that. Thanks for sending your files over, Gareth. Yeah, we see Gareth is saying Simon Phillips is copying Pablo again. So we'll have to talk. I'll have to give Simon a call and let him know. So I just see from Alan Dubois, my Cubase is very sick. Do I take it to the shop? It started playing drums that weren't there. Then it just slowed down and chirked and died. So it could be maybe it's your computer that's, I'm not sure if it's a computer that's kind of calling that is causing it to slow down. And usually software doesn't slow down, but you can make sure everything is working well with your computer. So we see James Bond. How about exporting MIDI as 0, like MIDI type 0? So there are two different types of MIDI files. There's a MIDI file type 1 and a MIDI file type 0. Type 0 MIDI files, and this is primarily for older hardware sequencers. Think like, Roland MC50s, the Brother hardware sequencer, the Alesis MMT8, I believe was a model. And basically a type 0 MIDI file all comes in on one track. So that's compatible for a lot of hardware sequencers and keyboard workstations that kind of utilize that format. And you have type 1, which is often used where you have the tracks for different MIDI channels. It's multi-track capable. So you could have a separate track for your drums, bass, piano, strings, organ, etc. So a type 0 MIDI file is really where it all comes across in one particular MIDI track, and it's often going to be set to like multiple MIDI channels that aren't defined until you get to the hardware sequencer. So I would say unless you're going to a specific hardware sequencer, try to keep it all to MIDI file type 1. All right, so we see even not using Cubase I like so much and Steinberg rules. If I didn't own my current DAW, I would buy Nuendo. So there's great cross-grade promotions you could take advantage of. So, take advantage of that. And I think you'll like Cubase or Nuendo. And when you do a cross-grade, we don't want your other program, so you can keep it as well. So it makes the transition nice and easy. Okay, so I see further comment from Alan Dubois. I hope I will get across the border to the shop soon, etc. So I guess this is with his Cubase that's acting kind of sick. So yeah, I would check. It sounds kind of like a computer issue. Okay, so we have a question from James Bond. Can we disable cycle marker so that if we click on a ruler, it doesn't active again? So if you have like your cycle marker here and you want it to just not do that constantly, there is a preference for this. Let me see if I remember where it's at. But there is a preference since I think it was in version 10 or 10.5. Let me see if I could find it. Yeah, there is a. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Okay, so you see here under transport, clicking locator range in the upper part of the ruler activates cycle. So if you don't want that on, so now when you click here,
Arithmetic.
it's not going to have an effect. So again, go to preferences to transport, clicking locator range in upper part of ruler activates cycle. So give that a shot. See, Marcos is saying the way Nuendo is organized, the visual man I like so much. All right. All right, so we see from Gareth about his iRig. So it says my system is Thunderbird. I assume Thunderbolt only. So adapters or USB or hub is the only options. I was thinking of getting a micro USB to USB-C to see if that helps. It can't hurt. So. All right, so just see from Marcos Gomez. So it's thinking about Sadie/Pyramix/Sequoia or SoundForge and Samplitude, but also Nuendo. So I think if you had like Nuendo and Wavelab or Cubase and Wavelab, that makes for a much significantly improved workflow. All right, so we just see Michael Pierce is able to join us. All right, and I see that in the questions, I'm about 2 hours and 55 minutes into into the discussion. So just as a reference for people. All right, so just see from. All right, make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, so I see from Sable, Greg, please show your VSTI panel so I can see what you have there. So when I go to my VSTIs, so on my work system here, I just have only the Steinberg instruments. So I have like Backbone, Groove Agent SE. We have the Grand, Hallion 6's sampler and synth. I'm going to have the Hallion Sonic, Loop Mash, Mystic, Spectre, Retrolog, Prolog. So just in Pad Shop. So just the included plugins there and other Steinberg ones. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. All right, so we see from William Baker, will there be special pricing on Wavelab? So I think there was a Wavelab promotion earlier in the year. So, usually kind of a lot of times, there's kind of, if you kind of follow, there's going to be almost like monthly promotions for Steinberg products. So just, always keep, pay attention to the emails and follow it on social media, and, and we'll try to make, announcements here when they're going on. But, if it's already passed, if you're watching kind of a hangout from a couple months ago, may not be as relevant. So, but there, generally there will always be, monthly sales promotions going on. We have such a wide variety of software titles that are available. Okay, so we see any word on Cubase 12 yet. So we just came out with 11 about 8 months ago, so I'm sure that they'll be probably working. I'm not sure if it's maybe 11.5, maybe 12, I don't know, but nothing that we could discuss. And even if I knew stuff, I would be under kind of an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. So okay, so you say, Greg, please show us auto-tune. So I don't have auto-tune installed on my system, but, if you wanted to do tuning, I could recommend either using the pitch correction plugin or getting into, getting into Very Audio. So depending if you have Cubase Artist or higher, so that will give you some good options. So if you wanted to do tuning that was, very kind of processed sounding, you could go to the inserts and come over here, and let's say, okay, I want to go to under pitch correct or pitch shift, you'll see pitch correct plugin. Or if you wanted to just double click and go directly into Very Audio, you could just do that internally and kind of have graphic editing of your pitch. So a lot of Cubase users don't feel the need to have a third-party vocal like pitch correction function. So but I don't have auto-tune, so maybe if you go to an Antares live stream, they could kind of show it to you there. And I'll just mention one more time, if you want to send questions in advance, I see that Jazz Dude is mentioning you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so I just see Cubase IC Pro is quite dated now, so is the hardware controller in light of the moves by companies such as SSL. Are there any plans for new controllers, hardware or software? So generally the hardware development is done by Yamaha, so I haven't heard of any plans for them doing it, but often because I'm kind of in the Steinberg scheme of things, that I may not be privy to all the product development that's going on. But I think the SSL is a very, attractive controller, so kudos to them for coming out with a great controller. Okay, so we just see independent of the interface, almost every tape machine can be plugged into the interface without any issues. I want to use one for the future from Apex, for example, if possible, RCA connection. So yeah, you could definitely, make sure that you have an interface if you're going from tape. If you're transferring from tape, all you have to do is, make sure that your interface has line levels, because probably, you may not get the best level gain structure going into an interface that's strictly a mic preview. If you go like line level, if you go line level directly out, then you shouldn't have any problems. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to disable the playhead from restarting where you click on different positions in a timeline while it's playing? Okay. Okay, so let's say if I'm just playing here. So if you're clicking on an event, if you click on empty space, or if you just hold down Alt and Shift, you could click on an event and move the playhead like that. But I believe if you wanted to go to Preferences and go to Transport, I think that Locate when clicked in empty space, if you uncheck that we could, now as I click in an empty space, it won't change the playhead position. But with that preference enabled, that it will now just kind of follow wherever clicked in an empty space. So just, again, go to that preference, Transport, Locate when clicked in empty space. You could uncheck that. All right, reading through. Okay, just reading through comments more. Okay, so I just see from Marcos Gomez, says $550 or $950. I just want to know if it will run another 8-channel interface, if I would buy 3 of them to plug more things. So if, it depends on the interface, but a lot of interfaces may have like an ADAT connection, like an ADAT light pipe connection, and that will allow you to use other converters. Some people use like Behringer converters or Army converters, other high-end converters you could connect to expand. So, but often if you take 3 USB interfaces, that won't give you 24 tracks. But if you wanted to make sure like you get an 8-channel interface has two ADAT outputs, like a Steinberg UR824 would allow you to do that, and you could have 24 channels that way if you wanted to. So just see, hi Greg, sorry if I missed it earlier, but is there a Spectral Layers Hangout tomorrow and where to get the link? Thanks. When I checked with Michael Scheibinger, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, he mentioned it. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I would check to see if it's going to be available. You might see it on the Steinberg YouTube channel. But if you want to email me, I could email Mike Scheibinger and see if he's going to be doing it and see if I could find a link. I haven't seen anything on it. I know he mentioned it to me in an email, but I haven't seen any promotion of it. But sometimes I miss those notices. So just see from Michael Pierce, at least a tape machine doesn't need a clock. Depends on if you're doing digital tape machines. So. Okay, so I just see James Bond saying why playhead always goes to start when we choose other track events. So if we come here, I think if this is dependent, if you go to transport and if you activate use video follows edit mode, that now when I click on an event, that it will go to the beginning of the event. But so try just to uncheck use video follows play mode. And now you could select events and it doesn't affect the playhead position. Reading through more comments. Okay, so we have a question. How do you set up System Link and why is it useful? So System Link was kind of an interesting concept. I think it was developed by Charlie Steinberg himself, the namesake of the company. And what it allows you to do is, it is a simple concept, and how it works is you could utilize two different computers and connect them with a digital audio connection. And this could be, like a SPDIF or an ADAT optical or an AES EBU connection. So you have two different sound cards, two different computers, and kind of like in the old days of analog tape decks, there's 24 tracks. If you wanted 48 tracks, you would connect two tape machines together and synchronize them. And that allowed you to work that way. So, we figured a lot of people at the time when computers weren't as capable for doing as much real-time processing with effects, that people could have one computer, if they had an old computer and they wanted to use that in addition to another computer, that they could basically take this concept and run tracks from one computer and another computer, both running copies of Cubase, and it goes down to Cubase Elements, and I think even Cubase AI LE can work as System Link. So you could hit play, and both machines will be sample accurately synchronized. So this way, if you're working on a project with someone, your computer is running out of processing power, you could just take a digital audio connection, connected two of them, and both computers are running. And again, it's sample accurate with the synchronization. So that was kind of the initial concept of VST System Link. And the second machine could also host VST instruments. So we could take MIDI from machine A and send it over VST System Link to an instrument on machine B and return the signal over the same digital audio connection. So that's kind of the concept, but as computers have gotten faster, there's less of a need for it as much for kind of distributive processing. And we could just kind of set it up here, activate it, tell it where it's connected with your digital interface. All right, reading through comments. Okay, we see a question. What has been the response, in your opinion, regarding spatial music? We use Nuendo and using Dolby Atmos for our first Atmos mixes. Have you seen an update by music creators? So what I've seen is a tremendous amount of confusion of, differences between spatial music for Apple's delivery system and Dolby. I'm kind of seeing a whole, and I have this a meeting about this, or a pretty significant discussion about once a week, and everyone that's doing mixing or mastering, they don't know either, and they can't find out information between the different formats and how it's going to work, or even if like a lot of people are utilizing it. Even just over the past weekend, my neighbor was just complaining his Dolby Atmos setup, none of it works, is what he thought, and he spent a bunch of money, and everything's supposed to work and it just doesn't, and this doesn't do this. So I think it's still a bit wild west. So I think ultimately that, people delivering for Dolby Atmos will be able to translate it to different delivery formats quite easily. And if you're doing anything in post for film, that, the Atmos and its down mixing will probably be the format that wins, because that's where the actual utilization of immersive audio is going to be realized, is going to be in a theater as opposed to home or listening to it on my Samsung phone, which does Dolby Atmos, or my Amazon Echo, which does Dolby Atmos, or a soundbar or something like that. So it's very confusing. We're doing okay on time. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you get notified of future live streams. So you see, dear Greg, do you know how to create techno bass? So yeah, there's a number of different ways. If I was doing techno bass, probably the first instrument that I would really work with is going to be Retrolog. So, if I wanted to just, come over here, I don't do a lot of techno music myself, but if I was looking for my techno bass, I think I could get everything probably just in Retrolog quite easily. So say I just want to come over here to synth bass patches, just kind of go, right over and start working with Retrolog. And I think that you'd be kind of in good shape with that. So I see question. So VST System Link sends digital timecode /SMPTE and allows fusion routing. So you could think of it that way. It's very analogous to, it's very similar in concept to SMPTE, but SMPTE isn't going to be sample accurate, and that's one of the unique advantages with with the System Link is you don't have to wait for MIDI timecode to catch up, and there's no issues with resolution of timecode, so just dealing with sample accurate, you don't have to worry about a lot of different things. So we see Michael Pierce saying, imagine having to mix for Atmos 7.2, 5.1 in stereo. I mean, I love the money and the time, but that's a lot of work. So I think the concept that many people are trying to do is to mix for Atmos, and then, many people have actually, felt that the down mix, theoretically, if you do an Atmos mix, it should down mix to all the other formats, theoretically. But I wouldn't necessarily do that approach. So, I know many people, when they build up a mix, I remember, working with Chuck Ainley a lot when he was doing Dire Straits Brothers in Arms in 5.1. And, his whole approach was to build up, because he was doing a remix of the stereo and then from there doing the 5-1 mix. And he did a stellar job on, if you want to listen to a wonderful 5-1 mix, check out, Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. And I think Chuck won a Grammy for it that year. But he would start with the stereo mix and then expand. And I think Dolby expects a lot of people to start in Atmos and hope that it all translates downward. But it's an interesting time. So. All right, so I just see, I guess Cubase Elements isn't enough to be able to create techno tracks. So you could definitely do techno tracks in any of the versions of Cubase. So, if it doesn't have a particular plugin, there's other plugins in Howie and Sonic that could do it, or any plugin that you can get. So. Okay, so I know we had some questions that were sent in. So let's get to some of the questions. Thanks for all the wonderful questions that people have asked. Okay. Okay, so we have someone that says, I've been using Ableton, all is great, but some big things in Cubase are amazing as well, especially with video and producing music for films. So can I get Cubase with a good discount? And first question, is it okay to have 2 DAWs on board? Really don't know. So yeah, currently there are promotions going on for Cubase. So if you bought like a Cubase Artist, the mid-range, you get the Pro version. So I would definitely take advantage of the promotion. You can have multiple DAWs on your system without any problem. So no problems running multiple DAWs. All right. So another question sent in. My main question is regarding time coding Cubase. For example, I have the film and I need to start music at 31 minutes and 31 seconds, but I don't want to set my scroll, the window, to 31 minutes, 31 seconds and start producing in the center. Is it possible to start, if I start scoring at 0.00, but when I will show my result to director, it will show the correct time code at 31 and not 0. So yeah, we'll show you how to do this. This is really easy to do with an offset. So let's say if I jump back here, I'll activate this project and we'll revert it. Okay, so let's say I have this file and I'll just open up a ruler track. And let's set this to seconds. So right now we started 0 seconds at measure 1. So if I want to actually have this be at 31 minutes and 31 seconds to start my project, all you have to do is you go to the project menu and you can say set time code at cursor. So at this point we will say I want to do let's say 0.0. So I'll just say 31.31.0. Let me just cancel that. Let me just start over again. Okay, so we say set time code at cursor. 31. Okay, so we have 31 minutes, 31 seconds. So I hit OK. Then you're going to get a prompt. It says you have modified the timecode offset. Do you want to leave the project content at the current position? So I'll say no. So right now we start at, measure 1. So we see bars and beats, measure 1, or, we have a little offset, but we see the actual time here of 31:31. So that way you could just do an offset just like that. So go to project to set timecode at cursor. At the beginning of the project, just move the cursor there and set the timecode at that position. Okay, so we have a question from Nicholas in Australia. It says, I don't get to see your live streams as I'm asleep. Understood. However, I do run through the timestamps and usually find a number of helpful tricks. I'm very grateful for that. My question for the next Club Cubase is the following. Mute solo just does not function as it should. Years back when I had LE4, there is a problem. There never was a problem. I click on MRS, it only solos or mutes that track channel. If I would love to be able to solo track and the rest mute automatically, I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. All right, so let's go to a particular project here. All right, so sometimes it could really depend on the status of other channels that are muted or soloed. So let's say if I'm playing along here and I choose to, mute to solo multiple events. So I want to come here. So that doesn't necessarily get rid of all the other solos. So we could just kind of add other tracks to solo. So let's say I just wanted to hear only the guitar and mute my kick drums that I have soloed here, and I just want to hear the guitar. So try holding down Control or Command, and then that will override the state of all the other solos. So sometimes when you're building up a mix, people may solo and just kind of keep building. All right. And that's a viable way of working, but sometimes you're like, oh, I just wanted to actually solo this. So just hold down Control or Command, and that will override all the other solo states that are in the project. And now I could just go back to where I was. So let me know if that works for you. So Nicholas, and thanks for writing. And I got to go to Australia. It was almost 17 years ago. It was my favorite country I visited. So thanks for writing. Okay, we did the next question. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Is there a way to have Cubase check the stability of all installed third-party plugins and also detect double older versions that could be removed? Thanks. So when Cubase is starting, it will, in the very first time you start Cubase, like a new version of Cubase, you'll see that it may take a little longer to go through the plugins. And what it's doing is a quick analysis test of the stability and viability of the plugin. And it will also measure and calculate the latency of that particular plugin so that so if it gets through that test, so Cubase kind of does that in the background for you. So sometimes if it's going to be a problematic plugin, you could choose to, if you go to the VST plugin manager. So once you're here, you go to the VST plugin manager, that you could see a block list. So here you could see plugins that could potentially be causing stability issues, and you could block, and Cubase will block them for you. It doesn't necessarily, if you have plugins installed in multiple locations or VST2 that will be showing up multiple times. I don't think it will automatically delete those, but I'm not sure if they show up multiple times within your project. I haven't tried to do that in a long time. But, by default, Cubase will automatically, scan for the integrity of the plugins. Another question we had that was mailed in was someone wanting to get rid of the before and after of a selected range of a part. So let me just jump back to another project just to show this. All right, so once I'm here, let's say if I wanted to only have this part and I wanted to cut the beginning before this selection, before this range selection, I wanted to get rid of that, and I wanted to get rid of what's after that range selection. So we could do this. So I'm just going to select a range, and if you go to Edit to Range, you'll see this function called Crop. And that will automatically delete what's before that range selection and what's after that range selection. So only the selected part is going to be left. All right. I think that's all the questions that we had mailed in. So let me go back to our live chat. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, you can mail questions in advance to Club Cubase at steinberg.de. So you see Michael Pierce is going to see if he can grab the Dire Straits remix in 5.1. That's also kind of a tricky part, is actually finding how to do the where to find the 5.1 content now as well. Yeah, and some more discussion on Dolby Atmos. Like I was just talking last week with Chris Athens, who does, I think, all the mastering for Drake, and so he's moving into being able to deliver Atmos files as well. So even people at that level are still kind of confused by the whole thing. All right, so I just see a question. Cubase, do you have or will have analog gear? So I still have, I think I have a huge rack behind me. I don't have a lot of processing gear anymore. I think I have about 23, just looking at my rack, I have about 23 sound modules and kind of tone module synths. I do have, let's see, an old Mindprint compressor, a T-Comp. I have like a really bad Alesis compressor. I have, a Lexicon LXP1, LXP5 with an MRC controller. I have an Alex. I have an MPX 500 Lexicon. I have a TC Electronics Reverb. Couple of other things. I have some bass preamps. I have an Ampeg SV Pro. I have a Yamaha PB1 bass preamp. I also have a Ampeg SCR DI. So I have some. I have some other mic pre's as well. So I have an Audient, the 8-channel rack mount mic pre that I use just for an expansion. So I do have some outboard gear, but I don't have as much as I used to. All right. All right. So any movement on the grid reflecting triplets in the audio editor? I know you said a while ago you looked into it. So yeah, I continue to kind of pass it along. Sometimes, some of those projects are set in stone and it may not happen as fast as we would want it to be, but there's kind of, a zillion features for other people, and everyone has their priority of features, but they usually have stuff kind of mapped out and scheduled. So I'm hoping, that we will see, some movement on it soon, but, we'll just have to wait and see what the developers do. Okay, so we see from Jeff Zabelski's mentioning now is the best time for the Cubase Pro deal. So that's a good point. Okay, so we see from Jay, thank you so much for your ceaseless diligence. Today I'm at the precipice of being able to see comfortably, and I may finally have control rooms set up and tested before Monday. That's great. Keep us informed, Jay. It's great that you can do it. I know I have vision issues, so so I can be very empathetic with that. Okay, so we just have a question. Hi, I have Cubase 11 Pro Windows 10. What's the best way to jump right in and start recording some guitar? I'm super intimidated by the complexity of it. Thanks. So if you are just recording a guitar part, know which connection that you're going to be plugging your guitar into or microphone into. So go to your inputs, and you want to make sure that the input is defined here. So that could be like, my analog one. So let's just say I'll just start with the preset here. So I could be, I have a preset. So I want to say, okay, I have 2 mono inputs. So this is my guitar is going to be plugged into input 1. So I can add an audio track, right? And I say my guitar is plugged into mono 1, or I could actually just select a hardware port right here. This will be routed out to the stereo. Make sure that you have, record enable. And if you want to hear the signal as you're recording, just do that. And you could record directly in just like that. So even though Cubase can be incredibly powerful, it doesn't have to be so powerful that it's intimidating. So just hit record, play guitar, you'll see the waveform, and that's all you have to do. Now, if you want to monitor through like a guitar amp, go to your studio setup, and you may have to just make sure that when you select your audio interface that you don't have direct monitoring enabled. So if you have direct monitoring disabled, come right over here and go to your inserts. You'll see distortion category for your effects, and go to your VST amp rack. And now you could play the guitar. The guitar will be processed through this. It's going to be recorded without the processing, but you'll record a dry signal so you could go back and change between different amplifiers, different pedals, cabinets, microphone positions, all directly right as a part of your Cubase setup right there. So, yeah. You see Michael Teams is plug the guitar into line level interface and wail. So that's also great advice. So. All right, so we see Millard Brown has his revelation of the Control Plus solo. So that's great. Great to see Millard on the live stream as well. We see that Pablo and Gareth also appreciate that. All this discussion of nachos wants me to want to have nachos for dinner tonight. But I'll be doing the index later, so. Okay, so I just see a question. The score editor does not show multiple rest. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so let's just say I'll start the oboe late here, and I want to go to my oboe part, and I'll go into the score editor. Okay, so say I'll just have like a blank part here. Okay, so here I'll just delete some notes. Okay, so come here and we have lots of dead space. So if I wanted to do consolidated rest, see if I remember how to do this. We could come over here, go to project, and you'll see multi-bar rests. So we can say numbers above the system. Let's hit apply. So make sure that, yeah, the multi-bar rest. And I think if we go to layout, so if we just wanted to go here, so go to layout settings, and then you could enable multi-bar rest. You can say after 4 bars and hit apply. And now we could see that you'll have your 80 bar multi-rest just as part of in the score editor. So give that a try and let us know. All right, so we have a question. Can you show us how to add effects only to the parts we have determined? So if you wanted to do just like in a selection, all you have to do is, let's say I want to take the guitars here. I will go to my audio. I'll first activate the project, and I'll go to the select, and I'll say, okay, just for this little section, I want the guitars to do, I'll say plugins, and let's say I just wanted to do like a flanger, just so it's really easy to hear. Okay, so now as we listen, and we'll hear the flanger kick in here. And let's say I wanted to change the effect to like a whole note flanger instead. So that's really all you have to do to put effects on just a section of music. All right, so we have a question. Do you have some tips and tricks for the drum editor, example, building drum maps? So a lot of times when you go to particular instruments, if you have Groove Agent, one of the great things is you could actually just create drum map from instrument. And if you have Groove Agent, that will automatically just build the drum map directly from what Groove Agent has. So that's pretty slick. But if you needed to make your own drum maps, you could just come right over here into the drum map area, and you'll go to drum map setup. So here you could just kind of type, and you could audition each sound by clicking to the left, and then just kind of type a description. And if you wanted to switch to a different note head shapes for notation purposes, or a different in notes and out notes versus a display note, so the C1 is not what you would use to display in notation a kick drum. So, but you could just simply come right over here and be able to set up drum maps like that. Okay, so you see Cubase 11 Pro crashing always. I don't know why. So try, a lot of times when it crashes, like if you see a blue screen kind of crash, if you're on Windows, that could be that it's going to be hardware related. But most crashes are going to be coming from third-party plugins. So if you hold down Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift right after double clicking the Cubase icon to start the program, try running it without third-party plugins and see if you still have the same levels of crashes, because it could be just one plugin that you use a lot that could be causing stability issues, and you could probably narrow it down pretty quickly. So we see Gareth is gonna head over to play with my toys. So you're always welcome. Come, I'll give you a good tour of Washington, D.C. too, Gareth. So. So I had a problem where I could not delete all mute in solos. It never happened before. So, any ideas, Greg? So maybe the mute in solos, sometimes, the mutes could be automated. So make sure that it's not going through automation. So I see sometimes people may just accidentally, come over here and let's say, okay, we're playing the track and they don't realize that perhaps the track is in automation. So you come over here and they're just kind of doing editing. They're like, okay, let's go ahead and mute. And they may not have, so they go back and it's like, why is it doing that? So there's a good chance that it could just be accidentally recorded as automation. So check that. So usually when I get that question, that's kind of the culprit. So I just see from Michael Pierce saying, Greg, my boss is a huge Dire Straits fan. I just bought an extra pair of Questeds. I'm sure I could persuade her to get some extra stands. Yeah, so I got to hear, I was over fixing a problem for Mark Knopfler's live recording rig in London. It's like one of those things no one could figure out. So they flew me out with 1 day notice, first class to London to fix it. And it was when the masters came back from Bob Ludwig on Brothers in Arms. So getting to hear it in Mark's room, which is, I think he had a 96 channel Neve. He had a Roland or an EMI TG series. I think that Band on a Run was recorded with. And he also has an EMI Red 57 console as well, all in his master control room. So that's one of those days in my job that didn't suck. All right, so I just see why the Waves plugins cause crash, bro. So, you should maybe check with Waves. So sometimes when companies have programs that crash, it's not really up to us to do. So, but you could check with Waves and maybe ask them that. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to recognize and change the tempo of an imported audio track to a solid fixed tempo, even if it contained variable tempo before? So let's show you how to do that. So let's say we'll have our piece here. And let's say it's varying in tempo and we want it to be the same consistent tempo. So let's say we'll play, listen to the click. So I'll do my tempo detection. All right. So now we have our varying tempo map. And what I want to do is to have this tempo map kind of automatically follow so I want this, instead of fluctuating slightly, to be steady tempo. And you can do this across a multi-track in kind of the same way. So I'm going to select that, go to my audio to advanced. And what we're going to do is go audio to advanced, and we're going to say set definition from tempo. And what this is going to do is basically apply the tempo changes as metadata into the files. So I don't want it to follow the tempo map that's fluctuating. So now I'm going to deactivate the tempo map and say I just want it to be 144, perfectly steady. So that's all you had to do. So go, once you've done the tempo detection of the event, go to advanced, set definition from tempo. That metadata of all the tempo changes of every beat is written into the file, and then you can just do a steady tempo based from there. All right, so we're almost out of time. Let me see if there's one last minute quick question. If not, we'll... So I see from Sable Winters is asking if the Spectral Layers event is still on tomorrow. So I'll send an email to Mike Steinberg, but if you wanted to reach out to me, Sable, by email, I think it was set up for tomorrow, but I haven't heard anything since then. Okay. Okay, so I guess we're just about out of time, and I want to thank everyone for the wonderful questions. If you have questions you want to submit in advance, you can send them to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I want everyone to have a safe and healthy weekend, and we'll see everyone on Tuesday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Thank you.